Tyler from Aspire Sports. Today's video, I'm going to break down my top 12 wide receiver rankings for the 2021 fantasy football draft. Draft season's so close. We are so close to draft season, and it's so exciting. It's so exciting because this feels like Christmas to me. Like the beginning of the football season, it's just such an exciting time. There's so much unknown. You're so hyped about your fantasy team, about your real football team, right? It's a great time. So let's get hyped. Let's study. Let's prepare. Let's knock these drafts out of the parks. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button to stay up to date on all the latest content. We release new content daily that will help you win your leagues. I promise you that. They will help you win your leagues. So with that being said, let's get into the video. The first wide receiver number 1 for me, Devonta Adams. And it's not a surprise. I believe he's going to be a lot of people's number ones. But I will say that it is a close gap between him and the second wide receiver. Like a much closer gap than it is between Christian McCaffrey and Dalvin Cook. For me, Christian McCaffrey's in his own tier. He's in the tier by himself. Where Devonta Adams and the second wide receiver, they're in their own tier. So if you want to swap them out for each other, that's completely fine. Like there's no argument there. But for me, Devonta Adams, because this is the last dance. Him and Aaron Rodgers said the last dance. I believe it was through Instagram, their Instagram stories. So last dance for these two, maybe the last time we see Aaron Rodgers, and I believe that there's going to be fireworks. He's one of the best wide receivers, if not the best wide receiver in the NFL. Very good route runner, very good in the red zone, sees a bunch of touchdowns. So Devonta Adams for me is number 1. Coming in at wide receiver number 2, Tyreek Hill, and I believe that these two are like your consensus number 1 and number 2, just like Christian McCaffrey and Dalvin Cook are your number 1 and number 2, right? Tyreek Hill, if you want to take him before Devonta Adams, that's completely fine. Like this is a guy that also is very good in the red zone as well. Last year, he was first in the league in red zone targets. He also, over the past 3 years, has more touchdowns than Devonta Adams does. So as somebody that scores touchdowns, he sees the ball where it counts. A very good system, one of the best offenses in the league, with arguably the best quarterback in the league. So nobody would be surprised if he did what he did last year against Tampa Bay, and he ends up breaking records this season for like most receiving yards. Like I just wouldn't be surprised by that. Nobody would. So for me, Tyreek Hill, Devonta Adams are your number 1, number 2. I would say like 1A, 1B. If you want to swap them around, go for it. But for me, Tyreek Hill is the second wide receiver. The third wide receiver for me, third wide receiver is Stefon Diggs. And Stefon Diggs was awesome last year. This offense really morphed itself into like this high volume passing offense due to Josh Allen taking a big step. He became more accurate. And I believe that goes hand in hand with Stefon Diggs being here. And I don't see them changing that last year. Last year, Stefon Diggs led the league in targets, receptions, and yards. I don't expect that to really change. He's going to be right there near the top once again. The only real knock I have on Diggs, and that's why he's at 3 in this small little tier of a couple of wide receivers here. Why is that number 3 is just the touchdowns. Josh Allen is very, very good around the goal line at running the ball in. And that's going to limit Diggs' upside just a little bit in terms of touchdowns, where he's going to have to see them from a little bit further out. So I just believe that's going to limit him a tiny bit, but still one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, attached to a very good quarterback, up-and-coming quarterback, an offense that is going to see a lot of passing attempts. Yeah, sign me up. Stefon Diggs, number 3. Coming in at wide receiver number 4 for me is going to be Calvin Ridley. And Calvin Ridley last year, he was awesome. I had him in a lot of leagues, so love you, Calvin Ridley. He was a beast. But last year, you saw him develop into this number 1 wide receiver. And some people, I think, are a little bit hesitant on Calvin Ridley possibly being a number 1, but let me tell you, he's a number 1. He's an alpha wide receiver. He might not be as big as Julio is, like 6'4", 230 and runs a 4.3, right? He's not that athletic like he is, but what he's very good at and better than Julio is a route runner. He's a alpha wide receiver when it comes to route running abilities. He can break down any cornerback in the NFL and get open. He's a stud. And he proved it last year when Julio wasn't in the lineups. He had some of his best games last year. So he's going to see a lot of volume. He's going to be a stud. And where he's better than Julio is in the red zone, where last year he was 5th in red zone targets. inside the red zone, and then second at the goal line in red zone targets. So he's going to be somebody that's also going to score touchdowns. So sign me up. Calvin Ridley for me, wide receiver number 4. Coming in at wide receiver number 5, DeAndre Hopkins. And for me, this ends the tier, like the second tier. I believe that these 3 guys, Stefon Diggs, Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins, are in the same tier, where if you want to move them around, like, go for it. I don't see a big difference between DeAndre Hopkins and Stefon Diggs, Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins. Like, I just don't see a big difference between those guys. DeAndre Hopkins last year was second in the NFL in receptions, targets, and yards behind Stefon Diggs. So he's going to be a guy that's going to have a massive workload. Like, I know that they brought in AJ Green, who's like 94 years old. I'm not worried about that. Rondell Moore, who barely caught the ball beyond the line of scrimmage last year. Like, I'm not concerned about those guys. DeAndre Hopkins is still going to get his. He's one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, has been for years. The only concern, like Stefon Diggs, is his touchdown upside, where you have a quarterback that's extremely good at rushing the ball and can score touchdowns on the ground. So that's the only little bit of concern that I have for him. But other than that, stud. So DeAndre Hopkins, number 5. The 6th player that I want to talk about, and this is where we're going to get a little bit different, is going to be Justin Jefferson. Now, maybe you don't agree with that. There's a couple guys that are very close here that I have a hard time with the 6th player and the 7th player. Like, it's such a toss-up. So there's another little tier here of guys. But Justin Jefferson last year, what he did was absolutely incredible. Like, one of the best rookie seasons ever. And, like, you're looking at, like, comparing him to Odell's rookie season, where Odell now is, you know, a little bit overhyped at this point of his career. But, like, man, those first 3 years of Odell were absolutely insane. This guy last year was incredible. No, I don't think he's the athlete that Odell is. But in terms of route running ability, like, he is already one of the best route runners in the NFL when it comes to man-to-man, when it comes to break and press coverage. If you guys don't know who Matt Harmon is, he does reception perception, one of the best pieces of like, any information on wide receivers, any articles out there on wide receivers in the industry. So I highly advise going and checking that out. But in reception perception, he breaks down his success rate against man coverage is 76.4%, which is in the 91st percentile. Then for zone, it's in the 74th percentile, which is so good to have that versus man and zone. And then against press coverage, he's in the 96th percentile in the NFL when it comes to success against press. So not only is he able to get off of the ball when they're, pressing him, he's also just so good at separating himself, one of the best separators already in the NFL. And now he's going into second year where he's able to have that normal offseason. He's able to get that real chemistry down with Kirk Cousins. The sky's the limit. Like, this is a superstar in the making. Yes, a couple of these guys are superstars that I'm going to talk about next, but he could very well be the best wide receiver in the NFL in a couple of years. And next year, I think we're going to put him already in that category. So for me, Justin Jefferson, number 6. Coming in at wide receiver number 7 is going to be A.J. Brown. And like I said, it's so close between him and Justin Jefferson. Like, I've had A.J. Brown higher than Justin Jefferson in the past. And it's just so close. Like, if you want to put A.J. Brown ahead of Justin Jefferson, like, totally go for it. The only reason why I give a slight edge to Justin Jefferson is you have A.J. Brown now has Julio Jones, where, in my opinion, Julio Jones is a better wide receiver, much better wide receiver than Adam Thielen. Not to take credit away from Adam Thielen, he's also a very good wide receiver as well. But Julio Jones has been one of the best wide receivers in the NFL for years now, for years. So, yes, he's much better than Adam Thielen, but can he stay healthy? And if he stays healthy, he's going to limit A.J. Brown's upside just by a little bit. Like, Julio Jones is still a dog. He's still extremely good when he plays. So it's just, that's the reason why I'm putting Justin Jefferson a little bit higher than A.J. Brown. So, but A.J. Brown is still a superstar in the making, is going to be one of the best wide receivers for years to come. Not only is he, like, incredibly gifted as just an athlete, like as a specimen, he's huge and he's fast. He's also very good at beating coverage as well. His routes are very good. So for me, AJ Brown is wide receiver number 7. Coming in at wide receiver number 8 is going to be DK Metcalf. And this is also somebody that if you want to put him higher than Justin Jefferson, AJ Brown, I mean, go for it. For me, I do think that there's a little bit more of a gap between Justin Jefferson, AJ Brown than DK Metcalf. DK Metcalf is a very good wide receiver. Don't get me wrong. But last year, he started out blistering hot. And I said to a lot of people, like, there is some regression that's going to happen because he was averaging like over 22 yards per catch last year. It just wasn't sustainable. Was scoring every single game. It just wasn't sustainable. But I will say he's very good in the red zone. He's good. That's where you have Russell Wilson targeting him. But a concern that I have is they're not going to fully let Russ cook this upcoming season. I still think he's going to be very good. But then you also have Tyler Lockett over there as well. Like, a lot of people are sleeping on Tyler Lockett. Like, Tyler Lockett is a very good wide receiver and is going to be a very good wide receiver in this offense, who's currently being drafted lower than, I think, like wide receiver number 23 right now. Absolute steal. But still, DK Metcalf is a very good wide receiver. Last year, he opened up his route tree, and I only expect him to get better as time goes on. He's like AJ Brown, a absolute physical specimen in himself. He's incredibly fast, is massive, is able to win by just his force. He's also has last year gotten better as a route runner every single year. So this is somebody who's also butting into a young superstar here. We have 3 guys here who are very young, up and coming wide receivers in this NFL that are going to be some of the best wide receivers in the NFL for a while. So DK Metcalf, wide receiver number 8. Coming in at wide receiver number 9 for me is going to be Allen Robinson. And Allen Robinson has moved up a couple spots because the more I think about it, this is probably his best quarterback that he's going to have in his entire career. And he's done nothing but basically produce like top 20 numbers throughout his career. He now has hopefully Justin Fields at some point here sooner than later, but also Andy Dalton. Like, Andy Dalton, in my opinion, is a better quarterback than Mitch Trubisky, Nick Foles, and Blake Bortles. Like, I believe he's a better quarterback than all those guys. I wouldn't say by a lot. It's close, but I do believe he's a better quarterback than those quarterbacks. And also Justin Fields is better than all of them, should be better than all of them. So I believe this is a chance for him to have this best quarterback of his career. And he's also a very good wide receiver as well, has been one of the better wide receivers in the NFL, but you kind of forget about him because he's played on some shit teams offensively in the Chicago Bears and Jacksonville Jaguars. So this is a guy that I believe there's a lot of potential here because, like I said, potentially his best quarterback that he's played with and just an absolute stud. So Allen Robinson for me is wide receiver number 9. Coming in at wide receiver number 10 for me is going to be Terry McLaurin, and it's also close with these last couple of guys here. But for me, Terry McLaurin edges out because I believe that he has the biggest ceiling out of all of them because some of these guys are really like PPR type of guys where Terry can be very good and he has a massive ceiling because he's able to push the ball down the field, and you're going to have a quarterback in Ryan Fitzpatrick that's going to give him chances here. I believe that he's going to give him chances. He's going to be aggressive, and it's going to open up a door for Terry where last year he was very good at contested throws. Well, not last year, 2019. Last year he wasn't as good, but that's also because if you look at the quarterback situation, it was pretty shit. But the year prior, where there was more stability at the quarterback position, he was very good, and he was able to showcase that he's good at contested throws, and he's also a very good route runner as well. I believe he's going to be very good this upcoming season with Ryan Fitzpatrick at the helm. And then hopefully next year, this team is able to land somebody really good for Terry. So that way, he's able to be a top 10 wide receiver year in and year out for fantasy football rather than having all these different quarterbacks. But Terry McLaurin, for me, is a top 10 guy this year in fantasy football. Coming in at wide receiver number 11, and somebody that is very close to Terry McLaurin as well. The only reason why in like half-point PPR, I give Terry McLaurin a slight edge because there's more upside in terms of receiving yards and that, where in full-point PPR, I would put Keenan Allen ahead of Terry McLaurin, but in half-point, I put Terry McLaurin ahead of him. But Keenan Allen is a stud as well, right? Is a very good route runner, one of the best, if not the best slot receivers in the NFL. And you have a young guy in Justin Herbert, who's going to be able to get him the ball a lot. Last year, targeted him a lot. And that was in 14 games that he saw over 140 targets. So a lot of people are concerned about his health, where if you look back since 2017, he's only missed 2 games, and that was the 2 games that he missed last year. So he's been somebody that's been healthy of recent, where in the beginning of the career, he was missing a lot of games, but recently has been much healthier. So I don't think last year he would even miss like 14 or missed those 2 games. I think he would have only missed 1 game and came back. But the fact that they weren't playing for anything at the end of the season, why bring him back? You know what I mean? So I don't even fault him for that. I think he'll be completely fine this upcoming season, and we'll see a ton of volume in this offense with Justin Herbert. So for me, Keenan Allen, wide receiver number 11. Coming in at wide receiver number 12. Wide receiver number 12 is Amari Cooper, and maybe you're one of the people that thinks CeeDee Lamb should be the first wide receiver taken off the board for Dallas from Dallas. I think it's Amari Cooper. Now, I think that CeeDee Lamb has a ton of potential. Don't get me wrong. And these catches so far this offseason at camp have been extremely impressive. But I still think Amari Cooper is Dak's guy. Last year, we saw a very small sample size through weeks 1 through 4. Amari Cooper had 21 more targets than CeeDee Lamb did. Now, I expect CeeDee Lamb to continue playing at a very high rate and is probably going to have a better career than Amari Cooper as it looks right now. I mean, this is just camp and we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. But I think for this season, Amari Cooper is still the guy in Dallas. It's going to be very close where CeeDee Lamb should not go much further than Amari Cooper. But I do think Amari Cooper should be the first wide receiver taken off the board for Dallas, where it's most likely going to be CeeDee Lamb, and you're going to get Amari Cooper at a good value. This is going to be maybe the highest volume passing offense in the NFL, one of the best offenses in the NFL. So this offense can easily support 3 wide receivers, even Michael Gallup. So I like Amari Cooper a lot. I mean, I like CeeDee Lamb a lot. I like Michael Gallup. CeeDee Lamb's price tag is going to get really crazy, though, as we get closer to draft season. So I'm probably not going to have a whole lot of shares of CeeDee Lamb. I'll probably have a lot of shares of Amari Cooper, who's going to be going a little bit later. But for me, Amari Cooper is the number 1 in this offense for now. For now, this can definitely change next season, though. But for now, I believe this upcoming season, Amari Cooper is the number 1 wide receiver in Dallas. So, with that being said, thank you for watching the video. If you like, please like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. Thanks for watching, and have a great time.